Hello, my name is Greg, and I'm a convicted felon. And something had to die so that I can live. And somebody needs to hear that today. So before you swipe away, take a moment and take a deep breath, because I'm going to give you some information that's going to help you to take your life to the next level. And it won't be a popular, axiom. It's going to be more of a paradigm shift. And it's going to happen not just in your mind, but it's going to happen in the depths of your heart. You know what I mean? Your soul is going to grasp the depth of the person that you are, that you need to get rid of in order for you to be the person that you need to be. That person needs to die, because that person doesn't align with the values and the moral compass of the person that you're trying to be. See, you're trying to be someone completely different because you know that your life needs to change, because your life is a mess and you see where you want to go. You have this grand idea on where you need to be and how you need to get there, but you're not willing to let the inner man that has been the person you don't want to be anymore. You got to let that person die. You got to let that person go. When I was in prison, the second time, because let me be honest with you up front, this isn't about the first time I was in prison. I'm going to bring you to the second time. But the first time I was in prison, I went in as a teenager and I got out in my early 20s. When I went in, the person that should have died did not die. He thrived in prison. The inner man that I didn't get rid of. I exacerbated him and educated him to become a stronger and more proficient criminal. While I was in prison, I didn't learn, my lesson the first time. Instead, I got to prison and I got around the convicts who don't want that inner person to die. They want to become a better criminal, a more proficient criminal. And all they talk about is when they get back out, how they can sell drugs and not get caught, how they can commit robberies and not get caught, trying to find out the tips and the tricks to the trade to, elude the police and to scheme and scam society. That was the man that walked out of prison the first time for me. See, I went in as an inmate, a fresh fish, and I walked out a convict. And that wasn't a good thing. And that's why I wound up back in prison. And honestly, by the grace of God, I'm not incarcerated for the rest of my life or dead. Because the person that died the second time was the person that should have died the first time. But I didn't know it was going to take me a little bit more time to realize that there was something inside of me that had to die, man. Something inside of me had to go in order for me to become the better man that I am today. And that's hard to fathom or hard to accept if you constantly are in the mindset of, can't nobody change me? Ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. Well, then that person who needs to die is just going to take over your life. And the older you get, the harder it is to get rid of that person. And it's the person, it's you. It's your inner person, your inner man, your inner woman, whether you're male or female, that's holding you back. When I was in prison, the paradigm shift happened in a moment. I'll never forget the moment. I talk about the moment all the time. People ask me, if you was to ask me, what was the moment that you knew that your life was changed while you was incarcerated? And I'm going to share that with you right here. It was around, I would say, probably about 2001. I was sitting on the telephone in prison in a satellite camp. And I remember sitting on the phone and I was drinking alcohol in the prison, free world alcohol. That's right. The guards were sneaking us in real alcohol. We had whiskey, we had vodka, all the strong stuff. Correctional officer snuck in for us. I was a kitchen clerk and my cellie was a kitchen clerk. It was the two best positions that you could have, on the main compound in that prison. And we had access to things like alcohol. But Cisco trucks would come in, or the correctional officer knew how to sneak it in, and he snuck us in a bunch of bottles of alcohol. And I don't really drink, never really drank on the street, but for some reason, we were having fun and I was drinking, I wanted to get my share. I was drinking in prison, and I went to take a shower. I came back from taking a shower, and there was about, 5 of my friends from prison in our cell, me and my celly cell, and they were all tipping up drunk. They're like, man, what's up, Milk, man? They were all feeling good. And I went to get the little bit of alcohol I had left, for my final few shots. And my celly was like, oh, man, we drank that. You were so lit. We didn't, I know you struggle with alcohol because I have Asian flush. If you don't know, I am Japanese mixed, and I have a thing called Asian flush. I'm one of the only ones in my family who has it, but it did hit me. And so I can't handle alcohol too well. And so that was his excuse, but they wasn't considering me, I don't think, and they just drank the alcohol. But I remember going to sit on the phone, and I sat underneath the phone. I was going to call my mother, but I didn't want to burden her. And I was going to call, the friends who I had that I used to call them. When I went to prison the first time as a teenager, I still had friends who were teenagers, and they were fools as well. And so I had people who would accept my phone calls. It was easy for me to, for the most part, to call somebody some kind of way, but this time there was nobody to call. I had personally burned the good bridges I had by going to prison with my family and friends, and I ain't even gonna say burn the bridges of my friends, because most of my friends were still living the same way that I would have been living if I was out there. They just didn't have time for me. So that makes you think, how much of a friendship do you really have with people when they don't have time for you, when you are in your worst possible position in life, such as prison or a hospital? For me, it was prison, and I didn't have anybody to call. But at the same time, I put myself in there. So I'm sitting there on the ground. I got this phone receiver in my hand. It's the old payphone style, like a paid for payphone style phone that's attached to a wall. And I got the receiver. The receiver usually, comes to where you can sit on the ground. You can hold it like this and talk. And I'm sitting on the ground with it. And I remember while I was sitting on the ground, something inside my spirit stirred. And I'm a Christian. I share that. I don't hide that. I can't tell the stories of who I am without including my faith, because my faith was the thing that led me to where I'm at today. And it gave me a guidebook, so to speak, the Bible, on how to be the better man that I am today, how to be successful, how to be, positive, how to deal with my issues, how to address, my flaws, how to take responsibility, all that, right? And so I'm not thinking about that while I'm on the phone, but something shifted that night while I was sitting there, and I'm sobering up real quick, and I just started weeping, y'all. I started crying. Nobody saw. The hallway was empty. Dudes went in the cell. They had, most people went passed out, and they were sleeping by this time. So it was really quiet. I'll never forget how quiet. It was eerily quiet. And it was that moment I sat under that phone, and I wept for about 5 minutes. Nobody saw me. Myself and God was the only people who know. And the only reason anybody knows today is because I tell that story. And after I wept, I remember thinking to myself, something has to change. It was in that moment that I thought something has to change, that something did change. That man that I'm telling y'all about died that night. Now, he didn't die in the sense to where he was, you got to think, the person I was at this moment had like 22 years, of history. And so even though I knew that man died, that inner person I once was, it was going to be the death of 1,000 cuts that led me to where I'm at today. Because even though I knew that I had to change, it wasn't so easy. And even though I wanted that man to die, man, I had behavioral habits that I had to break, and that takes time. You're wondering why you're not getting where you want to go is because you still have those behavioral habits in you that you need to address and deal with. And while I sat in prison, it was like 3 or 4 years before I got out from that moment, I began to change. I still was rebellion. I was still rebellious. I'll never forget my rebelliousness. There's times when I thought to myself, yeah, I got to change this. I was an anarchist. I hated the system. I looked at all correctional officers, staff, police, and law enforcement, including the judicial system, as the enemy. I had to get to a point in my life where I didn't treat the entire judicial system and all the correctional staff in the world and the cops of the world as the enemy, because they weren't the enemy. Reality is, are there bad people who work in the judicial system? Yes. Are there bad cops? Yes. But you can't spend your whole life blaming what happened to you because you had a bad experience on an entire group of people, no matter what or who that group of people is. You will live a sad existence. I'm trying to help you. Now, you could hold on to that all you want. And you could be a bitter person, and you could, complain about everything in life, and you're never going to get where you want to go, or you're never going to be that best version of yourself. The people who reach the best version, just because you are famous doesn't mean you're the best version of yourself. Just because you have a lot of wealth doesn't mean you're the best version of yourself. There are wealthy people who are miserable. There are famous people who are miserable. They die miserable. It's not uncommon. You see it constantly. Actually, it's the opposite. It's very rare to see someone who is famous or wealthy die fulfilled. They feel empty. Wealth in itself will not fulfill the void in your life. Neither will fame. Neither will a relationship. I say it all the time. There are 5 areas in life that I had to learn. And this is after I got out of prison. This is after I had the paradigm shift. This is after I had to break, and that inner man, that old me, had to die. And this is after I got 10 years. By this point, I'm about getting close to 10 years of marriage. We're reaching that 10-year mark. And they say once you reach that 10-year mark in your marriage, that's a milestone, because a lot of marriages don't even make it to 10 years. You see, my wife met me when I was fresh out of prison. I met her. She was still in the military. She got her own story to tell, but 2 worlds collided on an altar, and we said, I do. But we didn't know she had baggage. I had baggage. We bring that together. Now we got more weight of baggage that's just undealt with, and you're bringing two people who are broken in all kind of ways together, who never addressed their life's issues. We thought we did, but we were young. We didn't know no better. I was 28 when I met my wife, fresh out of prison. She was in the military, and a lot of military folks know being in the military doesn't solve problems neither. Actually, it exacerbates some. And so military folks have a lot of issues, just like convicts, that they got to deal with. And so around that 10-year mark, my wife, being broken, busted, and disgusted, stumbled into a church. And we were going to church. But when she went in this church, she met a pastor who she saw before, and she remembers thinking that this lady has something to give, and she never knew she would run into her again. And when she did, long story short, when we started going to this church, it wasn't the fact that it was church, but it was the systematic approach that the pastors of this church had designed that helped us get to the place that we are today, which is healthy, whole, and healed. So we had to sit down and reevaluate our lives and go back and say, hey, look, there's some things there are things that she had to deal with on her own. There are things I had to deal with on my own. And then there are things we had to deal with together, because we brought in together and we created problems together. This stuff isn't easy to talk about, but I'm telling you, the reason I may not be the most popular person on YouTube, that's fine. If I never reach that milestone of becoming, I guess what they call viral or whatever, I would like to. But if I don't, I'm at peace with that, right? I'm striving for it. I would like, and what I mean by viral is my audience. I have a big audience. I'm reaching a lot of people because I believe I have a lot to offer. I'm not selling you gimmicks. I'm not selling you promises that I'm the biggest and swollest person. I can pump you up, man. You get swole and you can get aggressive and you can live your best gangster convict life and move everybody out the way. I'm not selling that. I'm not selling you the get rich quick scheme. I'm not coming at you of the approach. I know a lot of people talk about, people who are in the pulpit and they are, hustling and embezzling money from the congregants. I'm not bringing that to you. I'm not bringing that. What I'm bringing you is pain. What I'm bringing you is suffering. Because through the pain and suffering, I'm the best version of me. And don't nobody want to stick around for the pain and suffering. You know what? You want to be told you got this great idea that you're going to reach this pinnacle, and somebody tells you, nah, you need to sit down. And you jet because you don't want to hear nothing that person got to say. What you mean, sit down, man? I'm ready. Nah, you ain't ready. You ain't ready for criticism. You can't even handle me telling you to sit down because you can't handle the platform you're trying to get on because you're offended by everything. Maybe you need to sit down a little while, build those muscles up, deal with that internal man. That man ain't dead yet. That woman ain't dead yet. You got to confront that. I may not be the most popular person on YouTube, but I guarantee you, when it comes to somebody who dealt with their issues, I'm in the top percentage on YouTube, on social media, period. I'm at the top. I can guarantee you that. I have a healthy perspective in life, a realistic perspective. You might not like the way I talk, and that's another thing. You got to be built. Because people are going to come at you behind foolishness. I know who I am. I'm not trying to be black. That's the craziest thing that I hear from people. Dudes trying to be black. I grew up in Louisiana and New Orleans in the South. I'm 50 years old. Do you think I have time to try to sound like anybody other than who I am authentically? I don't have time for that, man. I make 50 next year. I don't have time to be pretending. I don't have time for pretending. Now, do you think I got time to waste thinking about the people who think that about me? And them fools are probably struggling in life. I may not be the wealthiest, but let me tell you something. I'm in a much better position than most financially because I had to deal with issues and make smart choices. And if you don't make smart choices, you're going to be stuck. And you don't know what to do unless you know what to do. So something got to die. Something got to give. And so me and my wife, we submit to authority. When you get to the point to where you realize, because you were wondering how authority really works, when you can grasp what authority is and isn't, and when you can see good authority, because see, authority is not bad. It could be bad because abused authority is wrong. It can manipulate. You don't want that. You want sincere authority. See, there's authority in life. You have a boss. If you think that you don't have to listen to your boss, you're incorrect. When you were growing up, you had a mom and a dad and you didn't listen. That's why you wound up in prison. That's why you wound up broke, divorced 5 times over, because you won't listen. You got to learn to take heed from authority who speaks into your life and they know what they're talking about. Healthy, whole, and healed. 5 areas. You hear me talk about them. These are the 5 areas. And I've done a video about it. And I'm going to keep talking about this because I believe these 5 areas work. And I want to be able to help bring those 5 areas of implementation into your life. And that's the area of your physical man. That's the area of your emotional being, your spiritual being, your relational life, and your financial life. Those are 5 areas that need to be addressed in your life, and you need to have all 5 of them areas healthy. You can't. Now, you may understand one of those areas a bit more than the others, but you need to give all 5 of those areas time, effort, and energy if you're going to have a healthy, whole, and healed life to where you can live life, and you live life more abundantly, and you live life conquering your mountains and improving your life. And there's some sense of satisfaction. Do you want to live your entire life with no satisfaction? Nah, man. You got to pay attention to who you're paying attention to. And I had to do that. I had to realize there's some people, as that inner man in me died, there are relationships that have to die. You don't need to be hanging out with people who are going in the opposite direction from the direction that you're trying to go into. You want to be someone who wakes up and starts their day off with positivity and not negativity. Well, you got to get the gossiper out of your life. They got to go, because all they're doing is dragging you down and they're draining you of your energy. And so I'm back on that phone and I'm sitting on that phone, man, and I finished crying and I wiped my face. And from that moment on, it was like a 2-year period where I kind of backed off my family while I was in prison. I said, I got to sit in here, and I never overburdened my family. And I ain't gonna say I never did burden them. I asked my mother to visit me. You got to think, if you asking your mama to visit you and she got to drive 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours to visit you in a prison, you're putting a burden on her. If you asking your wife and your kids to drive that distance, you're putting a burden on them. So at some point or another, you need to look in the mirror and you need to say, you know what? I put myself in here and I'm going to get through this. That's why you always hear me say in my videos, I did my time on my own 2 feet, and I don't owe anyone an explanation on how I did my time. They weren't there with me. They didn't do the time with me. You know what I mean? And if they want to criticize me, I ain't got no time for it. I don't really care. You wasn't with me in the prison. I still live in the same state that I did my time in. And I don't hide from nobody. I see people all the time. I ain't ducking my head and I ain't ducking and dodging no one. I have integrity. I haven't been perfect. I got some flaws. I got embarrassments, but I never hide from nobody or nothing. I confront my issues. And most of the people who I had issue with, I ain't gonna say all, most, I've looked in the eye and dealt with the issues. I've confronted my problems, their problems, offenses. I've learned to confront the offenses. When I got somebody who gives an offense, or there's an offense and I see a problem popping up, I deal with that instantly. Man, they might not like it, and sometimes people come at me and I don't like it. But I need to learn how to regulate my emotions, and you're not blowing up off the handle. That's why the inner man in you needs to change. That's why your person who's inside you needs to change. You need to change. And I want to bring to the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel on YouTube, a perspective to where you say, you know what, we can talk about prison and we can discuss the daily crime that's happening around the world. We can address it because things need to be talked about, right? We need to talk about the degradation of society. Society is crumbling before our eyes. The moral compass is not so moral. And if we want to talk about that, we need to be able to look around and say, what's the problem? Why are we breaking down? And there's all kind of areas we've broken down in. Fatherlessness, I think, is one of the biggest issues. Lack of faith in a higher power. Everybody got their own idea that they're own gods, but we can't control nothing. How can people be their own gods? We can't even control the time we get up in the morning. You can't get to sleep on time. You don't know how to turn your social media off. You can't keep it real with your wife. You can't even, have a good relationship with your children. You still disrespect your parents. If you still stealing from family members, that's a problem. You taking $5 and $10 off the countertop table because nobody saw you. You ain't got no integrity. You got some issues that needs to be dealt with. Narcotics, you in your 50s and you still using narcotics? I ain't here to beat you up behind it, but I'm saying if you want something to change, well, something's got to change. It's going to be painful. You got to give some stuff up. I have not reached the pinnacle to where I can stand on top of the pinnacle of I got it all together. I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. I won't. I'll die with issues still having to be addressed. But I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to do my best to deal with as many issues as I can and to be the healthy, whole, and healed person that I can, the most healthy, whole, and healed. And I would like the same thing for you. And so as I build my channel, I'm eventually going to start a Patreon. I'm eventually, going to get that put together on that Patreon and in my memberships on YouTube. I am going to bring to you methods on how to get to a place in your life to where you're satisfied. Satisfaction ain't so easy. And my system is not going to be get rich quick. It ain't going to be a quick fix. Because depending on how old you are, if you're in your 20s, you got 20 something years of junk built up that you never dealt with. In order to get to the best version of yourself 20 years into the future, you're going to have to deal with the 20 years in the past. There are things you got to confront. You can't be like, the past is the past. Man, you still think about it every day when you wake up. You still think about the time that so-and-so did that to you. Or you think about the time that you did this and you still ain't got caught. You might have to admit and humble yourself that there are some things that you ain't ready for. And for you to get to a better version of yourself, you're going to have to deal with those issues in the past. You got to stare it right in the eye and say, I'm going to confront this. And guess what? You're also going to have to do. You may have to accept that the results you think you're going to get from dealing with those issues may not be the results you get. You're going to confront some people about some issues and they're just flat going to go off on you. So you got to be regulated and you got to be mature enough to deal with your emotions, because you know that you got to confront this issue for your own health. But they might not be ready to deal with their issues for their health. And they might slap off and go off on you. Oh, yeah, you did this, you did this, you did this. You who you think you are. You think you better than me. I heard it all. You fake Christian. You know what I mean? I heard it all. Oh, what about this? What about that? Sometimes I'm talking about stuff on my channel I'm trying to address, and somebody's bringing up all kinds. Epstein, that's one. I get that a lot. Epstein file. What about the Epstein files? My channel's not about the Epstein files. I just talked about a video where a guy unalived a dog, and you're asking me about the Epstein files. What does that have to do about the Epstein files? If you want to talk about the Epstein files, start you a channel and talk about the Epstein files. I'm not fixated on no Epstein files. I know that there are bad people in the world who did bad things to children, and if we can, let's get the evidence together and convict them. If there's no evidence, then I'm not going to lose any sleep about it. I'm going to always pray for the innocent children. I'm always going to stand up for the innocent children. I've done more in my community than you can imagine. And I spent 10 years incarcerated. And since I've been home from prison, I've done more community work and more social work than you could even fathom. I've done way more than any average person. If all you're doing is talking about what I should be doing, you ain't doing what you need to be doing. See what I mean? On the pin and the shank, you always hear me say on this channel that the victims come first. And that doesn't change. We stand on that mountain. Victims matter. Victims' lives matter. Victims come first. It doesn't matter the victim. Any victim. Youth, elderly, children. Doesn't matter who. Animal. I don't condone criminal activity. I used to be a gangster. I used to be a thug. I don't condone criminal activity. Not here, not on this channel. I don't have to prove to you that I got in my fights. I don't have to prove to you, what I was, man. I can go get my paperwork. My charges are clear. You know what I mean? I had beef with people in prison, and all this other stuff, man, where they idolize, Y'all talk about the police, but y'all idolize cartels. Do you know most cartel members are ex-cops? What do you guys say about that? You're worrying about the wrong thing, man. Who cares about your paperwork or my paperwork? Who really cares? Who are you today? Can you say that you're a better version of yourself? Can you say that you treat your wife and your children correctly? And let's say that you spent a lot of time in prison. Now your children are adults like my children, and I ain't got the greatest relationship with them, but I don't lie to them. I looked them in the eye and I told them the truth. Never lie. I could sit here and honestly say I did not lie to my children. Told them every word came in my mouth to them was accurate and truthful. I admitted to my flaws and where I was wrong. Now, they're being told different stuff their entire lives, so they don't know how to connect that and reconcile that. And so that's something I got to pray about, Lord. Reveal to them the truth, because I know there's some controversy inside their hearts and soul from the person that they're told that I am and the person that they see and hear from me. So you got to reconcile that, and that takes time. And I don't know. I'm not inside my son and daughter's mind. They need to make up decisions in their head and search and dig for the truth, and then let the inner person in them that has to die so they can be the better version of themselves. I always say, and if you made it this far in the video, thank you. But one of the best things in my life that ever happened was to have my mother and father tell me Son, you became a better man than we could have ever imagined. That's after doing 10 years in prison. They didn't know where my life was going to go. They wasn't certain if I was going to live or die or wind up back in prison for life. I had people tell me when they saw me come home the second time from prison, how long you on vacation for? People did not believe that I was going to last. Now, when people speak about me, they know. See, 20-something years of making the right choices overall, and I made some flaws. One of the hardest things to do in life is marriage, and hold a job down. That's two things that are hard for people to do. And I did those things. I held a job, my longest job, I've been home for 21 years or so. The longest job I held down was for 12 years. And the other jobs I had, I've held for 2 or 3 years. And so I had steady employment. I stayed married to the woman I met when I came home from prison because I believe that's who God set aside for me. He gave me a good woman. I'm blessed. There ain't nobody else going to walk through life with me like she does. And I want you to have that for your life. I want you to find the proper wife, the wife that's meant for you, or the husband that's meant for you, so you can live your best life. And when you get into a relationship with somebody you care about, it ain't gonna be butterflies all the time. Sometimes y'all gonna not get along and not like each other. That's where relational health comes in. You gotta know how to have a proper, healthy relationship with your wife. And it's not easy, man, but you gotta learn how to do that. Man, thanks for watching. And I wanna do more videos like this where I just talk real from the chest. I'm going to keep bringing the daily crime, the unusual and unique crime stories. I enjoy doing it. And I think a lot of people like hearing it. And I think the longer we do it, the more traction we'll get. But I also want to deliver on how you can live your best version of yourself, coming from somebody who's been the worst version of themselves. And I'm consistently becoming a better version of myself. I want that for you too. And I'm going to start a Patreon where I'm going to be offering these things. And I'm going to be offering mentorships to where, I'll figure it all out, where you'll be able to grow and become a better version of yourself, in all areas. Like I said, if you're looking for, quick fix or somebody who's over the top in one area, I'm not that person. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to help you in all areas so that you can be an equal whole man or an equal whole woman that's healthy in all areas and you have a balance and a balanced life, that's what I can offer. I know how to do that. And I know how to do it to where it takes time. I don't have no magic wand. The ways that I do it ain't quick. It's slow, it's grueling, it's painful, and it hurts. And if you're willing to walk through that, then I'm the person who can offer some help in that area. That's what I'm saying, straight up. I'm straight up front. You might not see the results you want for months, sometimes even years, depending on how much junk you got built up in your life from your past. It ain't so easy. Some people, when they were kids, they were molested. You just can't wave a magic wand and fix that. That takes some time, some mental and spiritual and emotional time to deal with that, to confront that, to heal from that. Some people they're adults and they were done wrong by another adult when they were kids, sexually. You don't just heal from that. And you bring it into your 40s and it's affected all your relationships. You got to get to a point where you can deal with that. For me, just admitting that I was a convict and I was a felon took me a long time. I was ashamed of that. I'm free from it now. I don't have a problem with telling people, hey, look, I'm a felon. I'm an ex-con, because it made me into the man I was today. But I wasn't always there. I would try to avoid or skirt around that question, but I didn't tell people. And when people found out, they were appreciative, and they're like, I never would have guessed it. Most people to this day say, I never would have guessed that you've been in prison as long as you've been. That's not something I connect with you. But when you say it, it makes sense to the man that I see before me and the man that I know. Man, like and subscribe. Please type something in the comments. It helps the algorithm. I want the pen and the shank to grow. I have hopes that it's going to grow. Sometimes I get discouraged too, y'all. I'm not outside of the realm of discouragement. I get discouragement and I'm like, man, I want to be able to connect and I want to be able to get this channel into the next level. And I know that I'm doing things different. And when you do things different, it takes time for people to figure out who you are. And my whole shtick or my whole platform is the most unusual and unique crime and prison experience on YouTube. And when you use unusual and unique, people don't know what that is, so it takes time. But most of the people who watch me, they know what I'm bringing now. You know what I mean? They know what I mean by unusual and unique. Not just my personality, but the crime and prison stories I'm telling aren't the same old average ones that you get on most of the other channels. You know, I'm bringing a different perspective. So I hope you like this video. I'm going to drop it completely unedited. I wanted to try something different today. And I wanted to bring something that could help you out and motivate you. You know, the members, and I'm hoping you consider becoming an actual member to one of my memberships. But if you're part of the, you know, Pen and the Shank community and you have hit that subscribe button, I consider you a member of the community. We just have deeper levels of the community. That's another thing. There's deeper levels of commitment, right? The deeper levels of commitment bring you to a deeper and more intimate level. And that's the way, and there's a whole nother thing I can teach on called levels of access. And I base it off of Jesus Christ's life. And this is whether you are a Christian or not, you can use Jesus's life because we know that Jesus walked the earth and he had relations. We have a book. And it's crazy how people question Jesus's life when we have more recorded documentation on Jesus than we do Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan. You know what I mean? Kublai Khan. We have more information, more historical writings from historians on Jesus Christ than we do Alexander the Great. But we don't have no issue with Alexander the Great believing he walked. We don't have no issue with Kublai Khan. But we have issue with Jesus and we have more documentation on him. It's crazy, isn't it? So his life, there's a lot that you can learn. There's a lot you can learn from Alexander and Kublai. But when Christ's life, there's a lot you can learn about relation. Because when I study Jesus Christ's life, I notice that there's multiple areas of access. Not everybody gets the same level of access, nor should they. You're never going to give a hater intimate access into your life. You're not going to tell him the secrets. You're not going to spend and share intimate feelings with someone who's a hater, an enemy, right? You got to know how to deal with a hater and an enemy. So that's how we learn, through levels of access. And then there's, you know, your best friend, your confidant, the one person in life that you can trust more than anybody. And you know, even if you're your worst version of yourself, they still won't stab you on your back. If you make the worst decision, they'll still tell you the truth and still love you. You know, they'll confront you. They'll tell you that you messed up, but they won't turn their backs on you. They'll say, I'll walk with you through this, but you have to accept the consequences for the mistakes that you made or the bad choices you made. That's somebody who's a true confidant. That's a best friend. That's rare, you know? And so we deal with all those issues. And I'm going to bring that on the Patreon. So share in the comments, what's some things that you would like to see? What's some things you like that I said? What's some things in your life that you would like to address? Let's get the conversations going. And, you know, share in the comments with other people in the comments, man. Let's build this community together. Tell them what you feel, what you think. And thanks for watching. Let's get it.